Nick Salles.
Nick Salles.
Welcome to Jits and Giggles.
Hey.
So we'll start with just your background. So you and Danny own Movement Art Jiu Jitsu. How long has that been around now?
I think Movement Art's been around for at least 4 years. I think we're going on 5 years this October. Yeah, because we've been at the new location for gonna be 2 years, and we were at the old location for 3 years, which was in Richboro, like 20 minutes away from where we are now.
Gotcha. And you've been a part of it from day one, correct?
Since day one, yes.
Yeah. So how did that come about? Like, obviously, the two of you trained together. Who kind of opened up that conversation?
Yeah, I think it was like a mutual kind of agreement. So it all happened during COVID. Me and Danny being training partners over at Marcelo's, we were kind of stranded as soon as everything started locking down. So Marcelo's stopped the operations over in Manhattan.
Yeah.
And we were kind of just lingering about, like training jiu-jitsu, because we just wanted to be ready just in case things opened up and tournaments were coming back into the scene. We wanted to be on point. We wanted to keep our jiu-jitsu skills sharp. So we were training, and an opportunity came up. There was actually a business in Pennsylvania, in Richboro, that was, closing their doors because of COVID, essentially. Right. And it was just one of those things that we could either just let this opportunity pass us by, or we could, at the very least, get this space and use the space to our advantage. So we weren't even thinking like long term, like, oh, like maybe this will build into like a gym. We were like, let's just start with opening a facility so that we can train, where we can have people train with us and just see how it goes. So it was kind of like an opportunity that just kind of fell into our hands.
Right.
And we had already planned like, previously, like, oh, what do you think about this? And kind of already materialized what a potential school would look like. So we had the blueprint already. And so when the blueprint and the opportunity to get this gym kind of collided together, we were like, all right, this is the time to pull the trigger.
Right.
And hence Movement Art came to be.
Got to capitalize on it.
Yeah.
So when you opened the doors, you said it was mid-COVID, so you weren't actually open for business right away.
Allegedly.
When did you like make an official announcement that the gym was open?
It's hard to say. Like, I can't really point my finger and say this is officially when we started business, because we did it very covertly.
Gotcha.
So we were like, hey, like, you can train with us. And I think the word started to spread, and then more people started to reach out to us like, hey, I heard you guys are training. Can we join? And it was just one of those like things that just happened as we were operating Movement Art. So it was very hush-hush. The way we kind of went into it was like, this is going to be like a secret session. And before we even realized it, it became like a full-on like operation. So it's hard to like say exactly this is the date.
Yeah, because you were like a speakeasy gym at the beginning.
Exactly.
That's kind of cool though.
Yeah, and especially like being outside the city limits, it wasn't as strict, but we still didn't want to advertise that we're training jiu-jitsu during this pandemic.
Right.
So it was that like, we were very like hush-hush about it. And then until like the restrictions started to loosen up, that's when we started like really advertising like, hey, we're a gym, come train with us. But it was a very gradual process.
Very cool. And you and Danny also already had like somewhat of an established jiu-jitsu career. I'm sure, was that a little bit helpful in getting people through the door?
I think so, because Danny was already teaching in that general area. So he was over at NPR, which was in Langhorne. So he already had a small like cult following, people who were, brought up through the ranks under Danny at that location. So I think inevitably when they heard that Danny was training at Movement Art or teaching at Movement Art, people kind of gravitated towards that. Me being from Jersey, it's a little harder. I did have like people who would have liked to train with me, but it's a little further away. Right. So I think at least the foundation of Movement Art was founded with the people that Danny was teaching and training at the time. But yeah, I think, even people who trained with us at Marcelo's heard what we were doing, and then time to time we would have people drop in. So it was really interesting to see how people were chomping at the bits to train jiu-jitsu during this time where, it's kind of frowned upon to have any sort of physical contact with people. So
and it's interesting because like COVID, a lot of people, think about it as a time where businesses were struggling and going out of business, whereas like you were starting a business, like you were doing the opposite.
Which is crazy.
It is crazy.
What people don't realize is when me and Danny like made a decision to purchase this business that was closing the doors, we literally like looked at our bank accounts and we like put them side by side and said like, is this possible?
Yeah.
And literally just barely made it by with the resources that we had. So we literally put all of our eggs into this basket, and we were like, and like I said, we were like, at the very least, if we don't make money from this, we have a place to train until the restrictions are lifted.
Right.
So we kind of looked at it from the perspective of, we love jiu-jitsu. And I think like looking at the grander picture of like building this community, I think, in my opinion, every strong community has to be based on the foundation of passion. So the fact that we were passionate enough about jiu-jitsu to even have the thought like, hey, let's just get this place so we can train. And what does that mean? That means sacrificing like all of our financial resources to make that happen, I think is what eventually led to the cultivation of the environment we have now. Yeah. But yeah, it was tough. It was like, you know, I was hearing it from all angles, like that this was a bad financial decision, especially coming out of college, still to this day, having college debt, and then deciding to just spend my life savings into this idea of movement art. So yeah, it was crazy.
It was a risk, but obviously risk, calculated. Now, were both of you working as well? Did you have full-time jobs?
Define working. I mean, like I was teaching privates. Okay. Like I said, we were probably both receiving some sort of stimulus from the government at the time. Yeah. But really, like I was just living off savings and teaching whatever privates.
Yeah, you didn't have like a salary coming in, is what I mean.
We didn't
like,
have a salary. We were doing the bigger risk. Exactly. We were doing like Zoom calls with people all over the world who were just hungry to learn. Like I remember we had students from like Asia, students from Ireland. Me and Danny were literally doing Zoom privates like from morning till night just to like get at least some hustling just to get some money in order to like feed ourselves and stuff. But yeah, it was basically just surviving off privates, savings, stimulus checks until we were able to at least recoup some of that financial sacrifice from movement art.
I also like when I hear about business owners like that, I wonder if not having a safety net actually adds to your success, because I think sometimes people that open any type of business but they have a full-time job, they have that salary coming in, you're not, even if you think you are, you're not really all in, because you know if it fails, I still have that. You and Danny were like, this is it.
Exactly. It's like that idea of like the line that's not hungry is not going to go after the gazelle, right? Yes. And that's kind of the same mentality I have, even with like weight cutting. Like when people ask me like, you know, what's the mindset behind cutting weight? Like, is that necessary? And I would say like to an extent it's not necessary. Like if you have the skills to succeed, you should have the skills to succeed in any weight division. But there is that element of like burning the life raft and like committing everything you have to this objective. So cutting weight, making sure that you're not being gluttonous and you're kind of constraining your goals to, look, I can only enjoy life if I do this, I think is a healthy amount of stress, like you're saying. So like someone who's financially stable, who's opening up a gym because it's their, you know, passion or their hobby. You know, it's like a passion project, right? It's their hobby. They're not going to be as neurotic about how can I make this thing work, I guess you could say. So for us, being that this was all that we had, like everything that I've worked hard for is now embodied in this gym, definitely makes us hustle a little bit harder, you know, like it's a thing that you're thinking about all day. It's not something that's just like, all right, like now I'm doing this. It's like literally like every second of your day, every action you take, every decision you make is going towards making sure that this thing is going to be successful. So 100%, I think it definitely helped.
Absolutely. A lot of the times friends that go in on businesses, it isn't successful, right? You learn that you make great friends, you don't make great business partners. Obviously, so far you guys are doing okay. Yeah. How would you describe like your difference in personalities? Like what is something you're good at that maybe is a strength that's a weakness to Danny, or vice versa?
100%. So me and Danny are very different, like personality wise. And I think what we have in common is that we're passionate and we love jiu-jitsu. I would say like me and Danny probably love jiu-jitsu more than anyone else I've been exposed to. And, maybe that's a little solipsistic, but it's that idea that, like, if this person is willing to sacrifice for this as much as I am, like, that's the type of person I want to go into a business with, you know? And, of course, being friends helps with that, because being friends with someone means that you trust them, and then you trust that they're going to make decisions in your well-being and your best interests. So there is that, relationship aspect to it. But there, like you're saying, there's also the dynamic of like, what am I strong at? What is he strong at? What am I, like, being conscious of what my weaknesses are so that we can complement each other. And I think from the very beginning, we understood like what our strengths and weaknesses were. So like, for example, I would say I'm a little bit more technologically savvy.
Okay.
Growing up, you know, being really into computers, being into like Photoshop,
Yeah.
or, you know, I would play around with DAW, like with music production and stuff. So when it came to the marketing and setting up the website and doing all that stuff, you know, the stuff that Sean's doing now, I was able to at least do the bare minimum to get that started.
Right.
Whereas he would be like, you know, I trust you with that. I have no idea how to do any of that stuff. So I was kind of delegated with that stuff. And then on the other end, you know, a lot of the handy stuff that had to be done at Movement Art, you know, like putting up posters, you know, setting up equipment. Like Danny likes to be a little bit more hands-on with stuff.
Right.
So then we can kind of like delegate kind of like our responsibilities based on what we're strong and what we're weak with. And that's what kind of like helped at least get Movement Art started. It's like, all right, you do this, I do that, especially with the time constraints that we were working under. Like, all right, during a pandemic, how do we get this thing up and started? And and I think with any relationship, it's constant communication. So, you know, even though the legwork is done and over with, we have a functional business, we're constantly checking in with each other, communicating like, all right, what do we do now? You do this, I do this. And, you know, you're going to bump heads time to time. And that's where the friendship comes in. It's like, you know, if you have a disagreement with your friend, you're not going to, you know, ruin a friendship over a disagreement. So how can we reconcile our differences and move forward from this?
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Did you kind of know that you guys had such a good balance before going in as business partners, or did you figure that out along the way?
I think a lot of it we figured out along the way, because like it's tough, right? Because it is a gamble, especially like when all you know about this person is what you see from them in the jiu-jitsu environment. And luckily we had a lot of like off the mats experiences with each other. Like we would travel and compete. I would see, you know, how he deals with stress. He would see how I would do in specific situations. So I was very like confident that we were both level-headed individuals, and that no matter what, no matter how tough things got, that we'd be able to work through it. Whereas like, you know, I know family members who are in businesses with each other, but there's not that quality or that understanding. So there's a lot of tension. And so I would say like, you know, given the circumstances of like what jiu-jitsu entails and what competing internationally entails, we were able to see each other's depths of like, you know, how does stress affect this person? Like things that I don't see, I don't think other people would be able to see in their partners or their friends unless they were in these specific situations. So we were really confident that going into it, that whatever happens, we'd be able to deal with it.
That's awesome. Because I mean, I'm sure you've heard stories of like friends that get along so well, but like to your point, it's the environment that could change everything. Like you're great friends, but then you're roommates and you don't get along at all.
Exactly.
So, you know, you could be great friends and your business partner aspect is like trash. So it sounds like from traveling and being friends for as long as you were able to kind of see each other in different environments.
100%. Like, you know, we would travel to Japan, we would travel to Sweden. Like we taught seminars in Sweden. We would travel to London to compete. And all the while we're cutting weight, we're having to brainstorm last second sauna sessions and
work together.
And work together while, you know, sleep deprived, food deprived, like teaching together,
stressful,
traveling together. So, and not once did I see like Danny falter on any of his character, right? Like I've never seen him like mistreat someone because he was hungry or because he was tired. He was always someone that is about the principles of like who he is as a person. And he never allowed these like peripheral things to affect that. And so when you see that, you're like, okay, like, what's a pandemic if this person can do all of that? And I think for a lot of people, there is always that shred of doubt, but I think it's because, like you're saying, they've never seen the person at their most vulnerable. And jiu-jitsu has allowed us to at least see that in each other.
Absolutely.
And like you're saying, like our relationship grew because business is not like jiu-jitsu. You're gonna be confronted with unique problems. But just like jiu-jitsu, it's all about problem solving. So just because it's a different domain doesn't mean that we can't solve it together or we can't troubleshoot it. So a lot of it has just been applying the principles that we've learned from jiu-jitsu into the business domain, something that to this day, I think me and Danny are white belts in regards to it. So it's something that we're still learning, obviously. But yeah, all of that experience together, traveling, competing, learning, has helped us, at least,
Definitely,
you know, with the business aspect of things.
Absolutely. So it sounds like if you want to go into business, or your advice is hang out with them while they're hungry. And maybe travel a little bit too, and maybe go through a pandemic, but hopefully not.
That's a plus.
So your background, so you have your black belt through Mikey Musumeci, correct? Yeah. So how did that come about? You were like, tell me the background if you can. It's interesting.
Yeah. So it's really interesting because Danny obviously knew Mikey when he was traveling to like Vegas to train with his friend over there. And so when Danny had, I guess, got this seminar together with Mikey at the NPR location, he invited me. Danny was like, yo, Mikey's going to be in town, come through. And I didn't really think much of it. I was like, you know, this is one of my idols. Like I look up to this guy. So I just wanted to learn. Yeah. So I showed up, put on my belt, took the seminar, but organically, to my surprise, a friendship started to blossom out of it. So yeah, honestly, it just happened organically. Like people ask me that, like, how did that friendship start? And I can't even describe it because it's like when, I guess if things are meant to be, they just kind of happen like that. I didn't even go into it with any expectations. So after the seminar, Mikey pulled us off to the side and was like, hey, what are you guys working on? We're like, hey, we're working on this. He's like, that's really cool. I've been working on this. And the next thing you know, you're texting each other, you're messaging each other. And I think there's just that essence of like when you see yourself in someone else, that's kind of what sparks a friendship, because you see that this person genuinely likes the same things that you like. And I guess from his perspective, he was like, like these guys are kind of on the right path. Let me help them out a little bit. At least that's what I think his perspective on it was.
Organic.
It was organic. It wasn't, it wasn't anything crazy. It wasn't anything like I said, with the business, you can't like point your finger and say, this is when the friendship started. But Mikey did start to take a larger role in my relationship with him, as in like a student coach relationship during the pandemic. Like I said, with Marcelo Garcia closing down the gym and me and Danny kind of being stranded without much guidance. So we would train in like my basement. We would train like wherever we could possibly find a mat space, we would be training. And then me and Danny would be troubleshooting. We'd be like, what does Mikey think about this? So we'd message Mikey like, Mikey, what would you do if you're here? And he'd be like, oh, that's awesome. Like, you should do this. And then one thing led to another. And then things really started to shift once the restrictions started to be lifted. And then the IBJJF started to announce tournaments. And that's when things got interesting, because me and Danny were like, okay. And this was after we opened up Movement Art, right? Yeah. So me and Danny were like, okay, so we're going to compete at PANS, which I think was like 3 months after the inception of Movement Art, or the opening of Movement Art. So we were like, all right, we really have to get ready for this, but how? Yeah. There's just me and you. We have a couple of students. So how do we get ready? So I'm super indebted to Mikey for this. He didn't have to do this by any means, but he kind of, stepped in, guided us towards that tournament, gave us instructions and strategies on how we could compete. And then the rest is history. We competed at the PANS at brown belt. This was in the gi. Me and Danny closed out the featherweight division. Awesome. And of course, the events kind of lined up in such a way that we could take advantage of the opportunities that we were given. But I don't think we would have won that division without Mikey's guidance. Right. And that was kind of a pivotal moment for us, because still kind of representing Marcelo, but his coaching being absent in that process, we were kind of met with the decision, like, what does this mean for us? Like, what does this represent for the future of our, jiu-jitsu journey? So we won one of the biggest titles you can win in the gi at brown belt. Yeah. But it was much to Mikey's guidance and coaching. So do we just leave like everything that we've known and everything that we've kind of identified ourselves with and start this new chapter? And that's kind of the direction we chose to go with. So we had that conversation with Marcelo, which was awkward.
I was going to say, that was very awkward.
Yeah. But it was awkward, but it was relatively easy because, like I said, a lot of the strings were snipped during COVID, right? Yeah. So the absence of, Marcelo and our coaching and guiding us at these times kind of allowed there to be a void for Mikey to step in. So that's when we were like, look, Mikey, we would love to be black belts under you. What do you think about that? If you're uncomfortable, or if that's not something that you see for yourself, that's totally fine. And Mikey was like, no, like you guys are like my students, you know, you guys are my friends. More than happy to award you guys with a black belt.
Wow.
And then, the rest was history.
That must have been a cool moment.
Oh, it was such an awesome moment, because it was, like I said, it was someone I really like deeply looked up to, not just in jiu-jitsu, but just as a person. He represents everything that me and Danny stand for when it comes to jiu-jitsu. So for him to give us that option meant the world to us. And it just made it easier for us, because I will say we were kind of stranded and in limbo with Marcelo being like, I'm not sure if I'm ever going to open my gym up.
Right.
Like literally like had no idea if the Manhattan school was ever going to open up. And he was insistent on, as long as my school's not open, I don't have any plans to promote anyone a black belt, right? So
you gotta do what's best for you.
Yeah, so our hands were tied if we were to not take the options that Mikey gave us, which, you know, in hindsight was the best option, I think, anyways. So it was just, it was.
Do you and Danny have like any type of relationship with Marcelo to this day?
Yeah, I think like if I saw Marcelo at a tournament, it would be cordial. I can go up to him, I can talk to him, we can laugh about things that happened in the past, but you know, not in the sense that things were left off before COVID, which was like, you know, for those who don't know, I was teaching at Marcelo's. I was an assistant instructor. I was teaching intros. So our relationship was definitely a lot more intimate because he was my employer. But now it's just a lot more like, hey, like I'm a coach, you're a coach, you know, I used to train with you. Like, what's up? So it's still good vibes, but
that's good. Yeah. Well, I was going to bring up, like, I think the reason it's good vibes is because you guys communicated. And I think there's 100%. A lack of that sometimes in the jiu-jitsu community or just in general. So I think it's a testament to like you guys actually sitting him down and having a conversation, because some people don't. Some people just, you know, go behind their back and then they wonder why there's bad blood, right?
Yeah. And like, why is that? Like, and that kind of goes back to like jiu-jitsu as a whole has this weird culture where it's like taboo to talk about certain things. Like even, so we're talking about belts, right? Like I know so many coaches that tell their students that talking about belts and promotions is taboo, to the point where if a student even brings up the prospect of being promoted, they'll purposely punish them and not promote them just for even being curious about what is necessary for their promotion. So in that Movement Art, we've totally like broke down those walls. We tell our students all the time, like there's a curriculum for a reason and you're a student for a reason. If these belts mean anything, if they're analogous to like a degree and like a college degree or like any sort of like a professional degree, you have all the rights to ask us like what is required of you to receive that promotion, that degree. So for us, it's not taboo at all. So like you're saying, I think that kind of stems from that sentiment. It's like we can't talk about certain things with our coaches or else it's disrespectful. Right.
You have a more transparent environment, it sounds
I think
like.
it should. I think we should break down these walls of what we are allowed to talk about with our coaches. And so that we can be a little bit more transparent. Because if from the very beginning, you know that there's very hard lines on what you can talk about, of course you're not going to feel comfortable talking about your worries about, you know, what's going to happen next, you know, like you don't have a gym. Like if I didn't believe that you should be able to talk about these things with your coaches, like you're saying, I probably wouldn't have the guts to have that conversation. And I think that's something we need to spread more. It's like, no, like you shouldn't just Irish goodbye your coach if you disagree with them. Like talk to them. They're a human being, you know?
Exactly.
So
it is interesting why, and I'm sure some of those reasons is fear. They don't feel comfortable, or it's just awkward and it's just like avoidance, I guess.
Yeah, but why is like awkwardness like an emotion that we avoid? Like the conversation was so awkward.
Yeah, but you still have to do it.
Yeah, and it was so like, like whatever you want to call it, like cringe or like, but you have to do it if you respect the person, which I respect Marcelo so much as a person, as an athlete, as a coach, and he deserves us to be able to be transparent about what our goals are and where do we go from there. So to your point, like if you're one of those people who are just like training and then you're like, I don't like the training or whatever the case is, and you're just like, peace. Like ask yourself, like, why are you doing that? Like,
Not to mention, this community is not that big. Like,
yeah,
you're going to run into them again.
You're going to run into them. And then, and I see it all the
It's
time.
even
Like,
more
at tournaments,
awkward.
like, oh my God, did you see who just walked in? Like, who? It's like, no, don't look, don't
yeah,
look.
and it's like, it shouldn't get to that point.
No, like, it doesn't really make sense. Even if even if things got left, like, in a bad place, like, we should be able to have these conversations and at least, like, meet in the middle. I hate the drama of jiu-jitsu. That's why I'm kind of like a jiu-jitsu anarchist. I keep my bubble really small. I don't really play into like, I'm really, like, about my people, my community at Movement Art. I don't really play the politics of it. I'm not gonna suck up to people or talk, trash talk certain people. I'm just really about what we do, what I do, and that's it. And if you have a problem with me, reach out to me. If I have a problem with you, I've most likely already reached out to you, and that's how I like to keep things.
Nice. I'm sure that's worked out a lot better than the alternative.
I think so. I hope so.
Are you okay, like, when you're talking about, like, being a little bit more open-minded? So are you okay with, like, your students cross-training and things of that nature?
100%. I tell my students to cross-train. When I see my student, like, so one of the things that happens in a gym is that the gym naturally reaches an equilibrium where students are training with the same people.
Yes.
And so they're not getting, like, variability in their training. Like, they're training with the same partners. Their partners are most likely learning the same things. So you're, like, training with duplicates of yourself. Yep. And so so one of the thing, like, the complaints I get is like, man, I'm unable to do anything against my training partners
because they know what I'm doing.
Know what I'm going to do. So I tell them, like, so are you cross training? They're like, no. And I'm like, okay, so what are you doing Sunday? There's an open mat. Go train with people and see, like, how much you've actually progressed. Like, test your skills against someone who has no idea, like, what you're about to do, and then come back and then we can talk about it. So me and Danny, like, we push our students to cross train because we understand that it was so crucial in our own developments that if you restrict your students from doing that, you're literally doing the opposite of coaching.
Yes, it's a disservice.
You're doing a disservice to your students by not allowing them to at least cross-reference what they're learning with other students.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm, like, 100% for the collaborative approach. I think every gym in an area, instead of looking at each other as competition, we should be collaborating. We should have team dual meets. We should be cross-training. We should cross-promote workshops, seminars. We shouldn't be looking at each other as, like, enemies.
Correct.
But the problem with that is when we're the only ones doing that, it makes us look bad because it makes other gyms look at us like, look, they're trying to impose, they're trying to, they have an ulterior motive. It's like, no, I just want my students to get better. Right. And how do they get better if they're just stuck in this echo chamber of techniques?
I think that's a very green flag perspective because I agree. Like, if I'm training with the same people every day, it becomes almost choreographed. And then on top of being choreographed, to your point, if we just learn the same curriculum, you know what I'm doing when I'm setting it up. Like, there's no way you don't know.
That's a perfect way to put it. It's like unintentionally choreographed.
Yeah.
Because I know when I do this, you're going to do this.
Yep.
Because that's just the information we've been shown and exposed to. So the only way to disrupt that is by cross-training, or I guess you could compete too, but cross-training is way more, it's cheaper, first of all, and it's way more efficient. You can cross-train every week, multiple times a week. Competition, you can maybe financially support it once in a while, but and I think that's what these gyms try to do. They try to push more competitions to expose their students to different styles or different games. But we already have a solution for that. It's called cross-training. It's called open mat. So that should be the culture that a gym provides.
And I do kind of feel like the gyms that are okay with cross-training, to me, as looking in, it appears to me like you're confident in what you have, that you're okay with them cross-training. The people that are like, no, don't cross-train. It almost comes off like, what are you so worried about?
Kind of insecure.
Yes,
right?
Insecure.
But it's like, that's just the nature of business in general. Like, if you go to a restaurant, I would be really suspicious of a restaurant that's like, hey, I heard you're eating at this Italian spot like every other week instead of here. Like, what's up with
so
that?
Weird.
And it's like, dude, I want to eat Italian sometimes, you know? Like, I don't want to eat Mexican like every night. So I think it's the same way with jiu-jitsu. And if your student ends up cross-training and liking that gym more, liking that food more, so be it. Who cares? Maybe it was meant to be then. You're not, you're obviously, whether it's intentional or not, you're creating an environment that's not like
for them.
Yeah, tailored for this specific person. And there's so many personalities. So
Yeah.
We shouldn't take that personally. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think competition's good. Like it makes you work harder as a business owner.
Yes, 100%. So when the student cross trains and they come back and they're like, I really like what so-and-so is doing.
Yeah.
I really take that to heart. And not in the sense that like, I'm like, oh, that's not good that Jimmy was exposed to that.
Right.
No, in the sense that I'm like, okay, how can I incorporate that into my practice designs? Like if that's really that alluring or effective or interesting for the student, maybe there's something to be said about what they're doing.
Absolutely. Yeah. Which, speaking of that, I talked to a couple people that have trained with you guys, and you do train, or coach, I should say, in an interesting way that I've never experienced. So you can explain it in your own words, but can you explain like kind of the time limit you put on everything when you're teaching your students?
Yeah. So the cool thing with me and Danny is that we're so open-minded when it comes to learning, and we're constantly experimenting with how to teach students. And the practices are going to reflect whatever our goals are for that week. But I think for us, like one of the most important things is like teaching. And so every coach is going to say this, like I teach concepts.
Yeah.
But like, what does that mean when you teach concepts, right? So I've been to gyms where they'll sit the students down and they'll teach a technique, or they'll teach a set of techniques, or they'll teach a system of techniques. And most of the time is spent just learning these techniques.
Yeah.
And so you end up spending more time like receiving whatever is being taught than you are actually doing learning.
Yes.
Does that make sense? Like the ratios of times don't really match up.
Right.
So for us, it's like, you know, we constantly sit down, we're like, okay, how can we teach in a way that actually promotes decision making? Like we want our students to learn how to coach themselves. And so every design is practiced, or every practice is designed in a way where our students can learn how to coach themselves, whether they're aware of it or not. So, you know, some days we say, okay, this is the problem I want them to solve, and we design the practices around that. Or sometimes we expose our students to a decision that we've came up with ourselves, and kind of like, you know, expose them to it and say, hey, explore these decisions. But of course, these decisions are tailored for us. So figure out maybe there's a way that you can kind of impose these heuristics in your, you know, unique way. And that's kind of the way. And, you know, we can go down to the nitty gritty of it, like what these practices look like.
Right.
But yeah, I would say like for us, it's about creating decision makers. It's about creating an environment where students want to coach themselves. Correct. So I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
So when I go to a gym, right, for me, what speaks volumes is when class is over, what is happening? Because I've been to gyms where it's like class is over and everyone just packs up their stuff.
Rushes out.
They rush out. They hit the showers. They go home. At Movement Art, and this is one of my favorite things about Movement Art, is as soon as class is over, you look around, no one has left. And class is like an hour or an hour and a half.
Yeah.
No one's gone. People are still learning. People are still in the corners troubleshooting, problem solving. People are doing positional sparring. You know,
right.
People are rolling, but giving each other feedback. Cool. And so why is that? Well, it's because we're able to achieve this goal of making people fall in love with learning jiu-jitsu and playing the game of jiu-jitsu, not making people fall in love with, you know, sweat equity or just in love with the routine of, okay, I do jiu-jitsu.
And
so
like I checked it off for the day.
I checked it off my list. You know, you clocked in, you clock out. So I think for us, that's like the foundation of our philosophy. If you can create an environment where once the class is over, people are still hungry to learn and hungry to train.
That's a good sign.
That's a good sign.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I know you also, like, don't you give like a certain amount of minutes? Like you'll teach something and then you'll say like, one partner has 6 minutes to drill it. The other partner is that correct?
Yeah. Which is like, I guess the alternative of that would be like, all right, 2 for 2, 4 for 4. Yeah. I think just allotting time for one person to really allow the lesson to be, you know, marinated in their brain, as opposed to like this rep constraint or like, you know, you just keep swapping back and forth. Yeah, we really try to make sure that each person gets their own time to apply whatever it is that we're trying to instill in them, for sure.
How did you kind of come up with that time amount? Was it something you and Danny have done yourselves and just really liked?
I think it's so me and Danny have been exposed to so many different like class, like practice designs, from white through black belt. I've trained at MMA gyms, I've trained at jiu-jitsu gyms, I've trained at world-class gyms like Marcelo's, I've trained at mom and pop shops that, like there's like 5 people on the mat and like, everyone's having a good time, but there's not much structure. And for me, the most annoying thing is like when I'm starting to understand what's happening, like, okay, now it's the other person. Right? And so like every time you're about to like cross this threshold
it's
of
over.
like things are about to click, it's over. So I think like for us, like allotting time for you, like almost like you can be selfish with this time and do whatever is required of you to accomplish this task or to learn whatever the concept is. That works the best, at least from our observation, right? And so for us, it's all these little things that we are applying in our practice design comes from our own frustrations with things that we've seen in the past. Like, I hate when coaches do this. Like, it's annoying when, we have to do this. So it's like really like this process of trial and error and coming to a point where like, okay, this provides stable results. Let's just keep doing this. And it seems like the students are enjoying it.
Yeah. Because we've all been in that position. I'm thinking like I've been there where I'm drilling with my partner and maybe they're stuck on something. So they try it like 3 times and then the coach is like, we're done. And you're like, I didn't even go.
Do it. And you were helping them, but you didn't receive your help.
You were being nice and letting them because it was like they missed one little detail. So you're not going to say like, no.
And this solves a problem of like maybe like asymmetrical like levels. So you could be a brown belt drilling or training with a blue belt.
Right.
And so when it's the blue belt's time, they can go through the information at whatever pace required of them to
without
like,
being rushed.
Exactly, without being rushed. And then when it's your time, you might be going bah, 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 bah.
Right.
And they're like, oh crap, like this person gets it, you know? But like that's, your time. You can use it how you see best. So as opposed to what you're saying, which is like, I've been at the other end of that where I'm like, okay, like I got to help them now because they're doing it wrong. And so it ends up being like a private lesson.
Exactly.
All right, guys, bring it back in. I didn't even like,
you're like, dang, I would have liked to try it.
So trying to eliminate any of those experiences where people feel like they're not getting what they want out of the practice, right? So, and that's just one way you can kind of control and mitigate those experiences.
Yeah, and you brought up a good point. Like when it comes to coaching, do you let everybody choose their own partner, or are you kind of like putting upper belts with lower belts, or how do you handle that?
I would prefer levels to be, so like if you're a white belt, I would prefer that you're with another white belt. So like being partnered with someone who matches your skill level, at least approximate to your skill level.
Yeah.
There are cases where, like we have fundamental classes. If I feel like someone's brand new and they could maybe in this instance, like benefit from being with someone a little bit more skilled who can guide them, we can use that intervention. We can do that. But for the most part, I think just being partnered up with someone your skill level, especially because the practice is going to fluctuate. Sometimes it's just like learning the heuristics and drilling. Sometimes it's a lot more positional sparring. So being with someone your skill level is just going to benefit you regardless of where the practice leads you.
Right.
Because, you're partnered up, you're a black belt partnered up with a white belt. Now we're doing positional sparring. Like, what are you possibly going to get? What are you going to get out of this training? So I think that's just the best way to go about it. Now, if there's, good evidence to suggest otherwise, I'm more than happy to hear it and I'm open-minded to it. But I think as a coach, it's just, like I said, using your experiential knowledge of like things that you've experienced, and then hearing what works for people. Going on the internet and reading resources to see what works in other gyms, like, and then just allowing the gym to tell you what works.
Right. Because I always wonder how like brown and black belts feel, because a lot of the times coaches do put them with the new person because then the coach has someone to help. But then I'm like, it almost becomes like this person can't come to the gym to learn anymore.
That's laziness though.
Yes,
that's like,
I agree.
You just want to lessen the burden on you so that you don't have to be the one that's going around and helping people. Yeah. It just like minimizes your need to actually intervene and coach people. The same with like warm-ups. Like so when I was an assistant instructor, I would actually hear some of these head coaches say, all right, the goal today is to design a warm-up so that we can eat up 20 minutes of class time. That means I only have 15 minutes to teach before we spar. And I'm like, what? Like, why are you doing this, dude? Like, no one's pointing a gun to your head.
Right, like, do you hate your job? Don't do it.
Don't do it. And for us, it's like, whether it's an hour and a half, I don't think I have enough time to teach.
Right, because you love it.
Because I love it.
Yeah,
and I'm
it's
like,
a difference.
So for me, and so then that kind of scales down to what you're saying. Like, even just partnering up novice people with like more skilled practitioners so that you don't have to be the one necessarily guiding them the whole time. It's not right, especially if you're doing that to other paying members who want to learn. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Like, now you're basically getting like a free coach out of it.
Yeah,
like, that's not very fair.
No.
And then as the lower belt, I feel like that puts them in an awkward position where it's like, well, I don't want to like inconvenience this person, but it's not my fault.
Yeah.
You know,
like,
so
you're putting me in this situation, coach. Like,
yeah, that's not cool. I've even, like, to your point, I've even seen with warm-ups, like, coaches I've either heard or seen, they kind of turn a blind eye to the people that are doing it incorrectly, and they kind of let the other students correct them. It's like, that happens once in a while. Disgusting. Like, that happens sometimes. Like, you can't look at everybody, but if you're like purposely avoiding to help, then you're in the wrong career.
What's your opinion on warm-ups? Do you think
like, do I think there should be warm-ups?
Yeah.
Trick question. I mean, okay, from a personal level, I hate doing warm-ups.
Yeah.
From a, what do I think it's helpful? I think certain warm-ups are helpful. Like, I think, like, one of my coaches, like, they'll do like takedowns as the warm-up, or warm-ups that have to do with like the skill we're learning that day. Do I think shrimping every single day across the floor has helped me? I'm going to say no, but again, to your point, I'm going to say maybe I'm wrong, but I don't feel that's helped me.
No, then I would agree with that. Like, using like using parts or segmenting whatever you're about to teach into smaller skills so people can warm up with those skills, I think is fine. At least it's like more representative of what you're going to do with actual jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
But like you said, like shrimping for 20 minutes, like at what point does it just become busy work?
Yes.
And at what point do people,
right.
like you're saying, like, why is the whole meme or like a joke about purple belts skipping warm-ups a thing? That's because at some point you become self-aware to the point that this is a waste of time.
Yeah.
And that's why you're showing up to class 15 minutes late, because you see yourself that this portion of class doesn't actually amount to, increase in skill or increase in knowledge. So intuitively we understand that it's a waste of time, and then coaches are like, why are you coming in late? Like, and then some coaches even go further into that and punish their students for showing up late. So the problem isn't that students are choosing not to do warm-ups. The problem is with the warm-ups itself. Let's design a class where the whole hour is designed for the student to improve the skills required of them to do jiu-jitsu. And
that it's engaging. Like, I think my biggest reason I don't like doing warm-ups is because I genuinely find it boring. And I think I find it boring because normally it's always the same. Like, I know my coaches warm up. Like, I could do it without them telling me what I'm doing. Yeah. And I'm not faulting them for that. It's just the reason I enjoy jiu-jitsu is because it's different every day and it's a challenge every day. But when 100%. I know the first 10, 15, 20 minutes is the exact same routine, I'm like, this is boring. Yeah. I've done this 5 times this week. Like,
no, and if you wanted to teach like some sort of shrimping motion, I feel like there's far better ways to do that. Yes. Like, you can actually use like, all right, it's like side control positional where the person on top maybe is not allowed to attack submissions, and you just tell the person on bottom, just focus on shrimping and getting your legs back in front of the person. Like, there's ways that you can teach the shrimp where it's not like so isolated where they're just
you're by yourself, just going down the mat, cleaning the mat with your body.
Maybe
that's what it is. They're that lazy. They're like,
dude, that's big brain energy, actually.
You know what I mean?
It's like, oh, I have like
they just sprayed before you got in. They're like, let me spray, and then we're just gonna shrimp. That's hilarious.
Dude, I didn't think about that.
Which I have had coaches do the side control thing. I just want to call that out in case anyone's listening. And I think that's amazing. Yeah. But it's like the stagnant, just by yourself going against. Oh my god. It's so boring.
I would rather watch paint dry than do like
literally
what you're saying, doing the same, not only the same thing, but expecting to, like, knowing that you're gonna have to do that thing again the next day. So it's
like I got it down the first time.
Yeah,
it's now been like
I
years.
Can do it, coach. Yeah,
it's been literal years. So you guys don't do warm ups, or you do the warm ups you're kind of describing?
I think how you describe it is perfect. It's like, let's just warm up with jiu-jitsu.
Yes.
Like, you're gonna be sparring at some point anyways, so let's just do the closest thing to that, like, as soon as possible.
Yes.
Because like I think the whole idea of a warm up collapses onto itself anyways. It's like, you're going to warm up, you're going to run laps, then you're going to drill, and then you're going to roll out, we're going to cool down, and you're going to increase the chance of injury anyways by doing that.
Yeah.
So I think it's self-defeating. I honestly think it goes back to my antidote of like, I just want to teach for 15 minutes. I don't want to teach for an hour. So how can I do that?
Yeah. And that's not cool. And I think people, especially if they start cross training, they're going to pick it up that like you're being lazy.
Yeah. Or maybe it's like some sort of like militant like subordination, like this idea of like jiu-jitsu is like rooted in traditional martial arts. So like everyone has to like partake in this homogenous like uniformity, which is just like implementing aspects of brainwashing into class. Like, and I'm not
like I'm an adult. I'm literally paying to be here.
I'm a doctor.
Yeah, we're literally.
You're a jiu-jitsu guy.
Yes.
Like you. Yeah, I don't have to do this.
Yeah, and you brought it up earlier. I've asked a couple people this question, but how do you feel about being punished for being late?
Look, the only reason I can put food on my table is because these people actually find this niche, obscure sport that I'm teaching to be semi-interesting at the very least. The last thing I want to do is punish them for like being late. Like, like, sorry, my kid has like neurovirus and they're like,
oh my God,
secreting fluids from both ends of their body. And that's what led to me being like 5 to 10 minutes late. Like, and like, you know, and I joked about it. Like I'm like a lot of our students are like lawyers, doctors, you know, even blue collar work guys working on bridges. Like, who am I to tell them like,
you didn't get down quick enough today, did you, buddy?
Oh my God. Like, I'm just a dude that likes jiu-jitsu. I just happen to have a black belt around my waist, but that's about it. That's as deep as it gets. So
yeah,
I think it's just completely like not cool, bro.
Yeah. Because I was talking to Jasmine Rocha about this and she agrees with you, but oh my God, I posted a clip and it was like so many comments, which I love. I love the conversation, but so many people are like, it's disrespectful, it's ruining jiu-jitsu, and people aren't taking it seriously. And I'm just like, wow, we're rolling on the ground.
But so it's a tough argument to have with those people, because I truly believe those people mean like they have good intentions when they say that. And that's rooted in this idea that jiu-jitsu is like this traditional self-defense martial art. I'm trying to break away from that. I'm trying to teach jiu-jitsu as if it was just a recreational sport like soccer or basketball.
Right.
When you go to basketball practice, you don't have to bow to the coach. You don't have to face a wall like you're pissing behind like a bar when you tie your belt, because it's disrespectful to look at your coach in the eye as you're doing so.
That's
like,
crazy.
Yeah.
And call them professor.
And call them
like
professor. Yeah. Which is like some of my students are like, no, I want to call you professor. And that's fine. That's your freedom.
If you want to.
But I'm not going to like instill that and reinforce that. Like, what did you call me?
Yeah.
Nick? Nick what? Like,
like weird. Yeah. Like, I agree with you. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with wanting to. Like, if you have that respect for your coach and you want to, like, knock yourself out. But very weird to like correct another person. And to your point, they could literally be doing better than you in life in every other aspect. Yeah. So it's weird.
So to that point, if we're going to go and reinforce the title of professor, then let's make sure that we're referring to everyone by their
doctor or whatever.
Doctor this, you know, like,
interesting.
Yeah, we can do that. Fine. Like, it could be more egalitarian that way,
right?
But not this like hierarchical, like, you know, professors at the top and everyone else is just like a plebeian, like just there to bolster their ego, like,
because that creates a super toxic environment. Very weird. Cool. We kind of went over a few hot topics, but do you have any other hot topics you wanted to bring up?
Oof, hot. So a hot topic or like something that really bothers me is whenever I'm teaching like a seminar.
Yeah.
And so the seminar is done and we're, you know, getting into the rolling portion. And I want to roll with everyone. Yeah. And I want to show that the jiu-jitsu that I'm teaching is valid and that it works. But you always have these like TRT dads. Oh God. Like the gatekeepers of the gym, like kind of like sitting off to the side, like they're like hiding in the corners and they're just like chicken hawking you. Like you're rolling with these athletic like D1 wrestlers, you're rolling with this prodigy purple belt, and then they're just like waiting. And then as soon as you're tired, they're like, hey, do you want to roll? Like, if we can start a movement to ban chicken hawking in seminars, I would love that, because
I like that
there's
term.
there's nothing more annoying than like trying to have a good time and trying to like, you know, roll with everyone so they have a good experience. And then now, you know, 20 rolls in deep, the toughest, strongest dude in the gym now wants to roll with me.
Is trying to prove a point.
He's like, he's fresh, right? Like I'm about to tap out. Yeah. I need to drink my electrolytes at this point, and they're just willing to go like balls to the wall.
Yeah.
So if we can stop that, I would be really happy.
How do you handle that? Like, do you ever just say like, no, thanks?
Now I say no.
Okay, good.
I used to take it as like a challenge and be like, okay, sure, let's go. It doesn't matter if I'm tired.
Right.
But now as I'm getting older and, realizing that this is my livelihood, I could potentially injure myself if this is the case.
Absolutely.
I take it way more seriously.
Yeah, and you don't have anything to prove.
I have nothing to prove, dude.
Yeah.
Like, you have nothing to prove. I have nothing to prove. Like, and I'll call him out on it now. I'll be like, dude, like, you literally sat out for 30 minutes, bro. Like, I'm not rolling
that's
with you.
good. Yeah. Because we even have, like, at my gym, we have some higher athletes like Amanda Levy or like Deanna Bennett, who's like, a pro fighter. And I've seen men. Yeah. Like, these are females, which I think adds a different dynamic. And when they coach, they try to physically hurt them. And it's like, what are you trying? Like, it makes them feel so, like, you could just tell they're like, I tapped a professional fighter. It's like, ew. You're a dude. Like, you're a man.
Disgusting. Like, if you want a real challenge, be the first round.
Yes.
Like, get me while I'm fresh.
Yes.
That means a lot. If you can give me a tough round when we're both fresh, I'll respect that.
Yeah.
If you almost pass my guard 20 rounds in, like, dude, who cares, bro? That's not real.
Yeah,
if we're in a tournament, we're first round with
unimpressed.
each other. Like, I'm unimpressed, bro. So that's horrible. Like, especially like dudes that are like, whether it's like a dude and a female or like even me, like, I'm like 160 pounds and you're 260 pounds and you're going to wait till I'm almost
and you're proud of it.
Yeah. And you're proud of it.
And definitely went and bragged to his friends in the group chat.
And you might have someone filming like,
I
might see a clip on Instagram of you rolling with me and I'm like, what the heck, dude?
Yeah. That's a good hot topic is filming. Like, I get it. I'm not saying don't ever film, but I've seen a lot of people, they only film and when they're getting the best of somebody, and usually they're getting the best of them because there's a weight discrepancy, a belt discrepancy. It's literally their student.
Yeah.
And then they post it for the views. I just think that's very disrespectful.
I think there's this new trend in jiu-jitsu, which is like screen cap the security cam footage and post it on Instagram. Which is crazy. Like, there's been instances where we want to, create content and media, especially we have an online platform, so people want to see us spar with our students.
Of course.
And I get the students' consent. I'm like, hey, this is going to go up on the website. They're like, yeah, like, I want to be a part of that. But to hit a cool move on a hobbyist, like a dad of 4, and you like, dude, you screen cap the security cam footage, so you had the person had no idea that this was going to go online anyways, and then you post it. Like, that's so cringe.
It's so cringe.
That is so cringe.
I can't stand it. There's nothing I hate worse than when I'm rolling with someone and I just see, somebody's recording for them in the corner, and I'm just like, so I know you're specifically looking for a highlight reel right now. Yeah. Like, that sucks.
How is the person supposed to internalize that? And then on top of that, you're going to coerce them into post. Of course, they're not going to be like, like, I don't think that's a good idea to post it. They're going to be like, sure, dude. Yeah, I don't care. Like, of course, they're not going to tell you that they care. And it's like, so now you're like taking advantage of your power dynamic over this person to post this clip, which no one cares that you hit a cool false sweep inversion to a back take on a dude that's barely training jiu-jitsu like twice a week. Like, no one cares.
At the very least, I do think it should be like a conversation. Like, maybe you are just like, you have good intentions and it's someone at your same rank, or you're even like doing a flow roll. You just want to just be like, hey, I'd like to like record something. Do you want to be the person for it? If not, I'll move on.
Totally fine.
Weird though, the person doesn't know you're recording. You go out there with the mindset, I'm going to go as hard as I can. Maybe that person is tired and just wants to flow.
Off just thinking about it.
You're like,
yeah, because like what you're saying is that changes the scenario. So like a person like knowing going into it, that's totally different than just like you think you're having a fun roll. You don't even know what I'm working on.
Exactly.
I could be going into that round like, I'm going to let them triangle me so I can escape, which might be a crazy goal, but people have crazy goals all the time. And then you think you're doing something like, bro, get out of here.
Yeah. And that could really lead to injuries because you're not expecting your partner to be like going competition level hard. You know what I mean? Ugh. Any other hot takes you want to mention?
What's another hot take?
I've been loving adding these because
what are some hot takes that you are prevalent in like jiu-jitsu right now?
Let me think. Well, okay, we went over a couple. Like, definitely the being late is like a huge one, and then like how coaches have you treat them are a huge one. But I'm trying to think of ones we didn't cover. Sean, you hear us? Any jiu-jitsu
What's a hot
takes
take, Sean?
that are like kind of viral right now, or maybe something you think of? Oh, I have a good one. Parents coaching their kids.
Oh my God.
That's a good one, right?
Yeah. So I've actually had to kick a parent out for being a helicopter parent. So the problem is when you sign your child up at a gym, you are essentially agreeing that you trust us as coaches, and you trust that we're going to teach your child the best we can, and that we're going to provide information that is of the highest quality.
Yes.
When I'm teaching your student and you're telling them contradicting information from the sideline, that's where things become dangerous.
Yes.
So I actually had a parent who would undermine everything me and Danny taught. We'll pull them off to the side, show them things that were literally dangerous.
Jesus.
Like this dude was actually teaching his daughter how to do like a knee bar from standing, which is not even legal in the kids division,
definitely
mind you.
not.
And so, and of course you try to have these conversations like, hey, this is what we want out of the environment.
Yeah.
It's also kind of awkward for the other student that's training with your kid to be not only rolling with a kid, but rolling with their dad too. Like that's kind of weird. And if you respect that, then it's gonna be fine. But if you choose to ignore that and you continue to go down that path, then we're gonna have to part ways.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my take on it. Like obviously, like parents are super passionate. They want the best for their kid.
Yep.
Sometimes they think their kids aren't getting enough attention, and I feel that. And it goes back to our transparency conversation. If you think that's the case, you feel like your kid's being neglected, talk to us.
Yes.
And I'll do my best to make sure your kid is getting like more attention. But if you if you think that the information that you're paying for is not up to par with what you want,
then why are you here?
Then why are you here? Go somewhere else. I can't help you then.
Yes.
So that's kind of my stance.
That's very fair. And to your point, it is dangerous because the kid is now not paying attention to what you're saying. They're looking behind them.
Yeah.
And that's just not cool. I help coach kids, and most of our parents are great, but there has been a couple times where it's like they are calling their kids names so many times that I'm annoyed for the child.
Yeah.
Like I'll make up a name because we don't have any kids named Tristan. But it's like I'm coaching, you just hear like Tristan. And I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And the kids just constantly. And it's like, they're going to get hurt.
Yeah.
So I have actually put my body between
you create
said
like
parent.
almost like this artificial barrier, right? Like,
and it's not even like, yes, it's annoying the hell out of me, but it's like, I feel bad for your kid. Like your kid literally cannot have a moment to even think because you're such a helicopter parent.
So what do you do in that? Do you...
I just put myself between them, and then there's a couple times I've like talked to like our owner, and then he's tried to handle it. Usually parents get the hint. So far, they usually get the hint when you like literally put your body between them, and it's always the parents that don't train. I'm like, you don't even know what you're talking about.
And it's like the parents that if you even mention training to them, they're like, no,
I'm
not me.
Yeah,
not me.
I had surgery 25 years ago. You're
like this one parent literally said, I don't need jiu-jitsu. I have a gun.
Oh, I love that argument. That's
and I'm
a good
like,
hot take.
Why is your kid here then?
Yeah. Like,
go to sheepdog tactical training with your kid and like, I don't understand.
Yeah. I love when people say like, oh, I have a gun. It's like, okay, of course there's always that option, but there's also the possibility that something else happens as well.
100%. And how about this is a game, and if you want to better instruct your child on how to play the game, it would probably best interest you to understand what that game is, what the rules entail, and like your instruction is coming from a place of ignorance. You don't know how the game is played. You don't know how jiu-jitsu works.
Right.
And you might think that you understand because you watched a few YouTube videos, but that's not how anything in life works. Like imagine me telling a doctor that their advice is incorrect because I saw one YouTube video. Like,
one TikTok.
Yeah, one TikTok video. Like, and I feel like jiu-jitsu just happens to be like this domain where it doesn't get the respect that it deserves sometimes. Like jiu-jitsu is very deep. People do spend upwards of 10 plus years trying to become professionals in the sport. So for a parent right off the street to be like, no. Like, I watched this video. This is what they should be doing. It's crazy.
Insane.
No.
Sean, you have something?
Yes. This is one of the first conversations Nick and I ever had. Aggressive.
Yeah.
Right. So you're saying, so basically the hot take is like people making fun of guard pullers.
People making fun of guard pullers, which is crazy because I wrestled for way longer than like, so I wrestled through middle school and like 3 years in high school. I wrestled before I started jiu-jitsu. I know how to wrestle. My guard pulling preference is purely out of strategy and tactics, right? And so people who so people are coming at guard pulling, not even understanding that a lot of people who pull guard actually have really good wrestling.
Yes.
Mikey's wrestling is pretty nasty.
Yeah.
And people don't even get to see it because he doesn't have to wrestle, because he understands how to game the game itself.
Right.
When you pull guard, you're already putting yourself in a position where you can get to the spots that you want to get to.
Exactly.
Now, the guard pulling being dumb, like, philosophy doesn't quite make sense, because a lot of these people are coming from the perspective that, all right, I'm going to take you down, and then what? You're going to want to pass their guard.
Yeah.
So I made your job of putting me on my back easier.
Correct.
So you don't even have to waste calories or energy or sweat putting me on my back, dude. I'll do it for you.
Exactly.
All right, let's get this game started. And so really, it's not a conversation about guard pulling being effective or not, or being cool or not. It's more like, well, I don't want to pass your guard because it's annoying. And I just want to get those 2 points and stall. That's really what it comes down to.
Yes, correct.
Because if it was really about you being in top position and me being in bottom position,
Then you should be happy.
Then you should be happy.
Yes.
It should be a celebration.
This reminds me of, I don't know if you're familiar with Kevin from Webb, who went against Aljo.
Yeah.
That match, right?
Yeah.
Where Aljo was like, wrestle, stand up. What's your problem? Like, basically like, it's
brother,
like, what?
This is jiu-jitsu, brother. Like,
you know what you signed up for?
Yeah, and and Fury's sub only too. It's not even points.
Yeah.
So I'm pulling guard so that you can pass.
Yes. You're
Be
welcome.
happy. You're welcome.
Yeah.
But you don't know how to pass.
Right.
So you have to deflect the responsibility on things happening on the person pulling guard.
Yeah.
Because the only thing you know how to do is wrestle.
Yep.
And I'm sorry, but
That's
if I
not
wanted to
what you
watch
signed up for.
wrestling, yeah, I would watch wrestling.
Exactly. And like everything you just said, I agree with. But then even more so, it's like you literally signed a contract. You know what's allowed and not allowed, but then you're complaining about what's allowed and not allowed. That's like, to me, when I talk to Kevin about it, I'm like, I just can't imagine signing up for something and then being like, I don't like the rules.
I don't like these rules anymore.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can change the rules now.
Yeah.
Like,
Or
no.
embarrass you into standing up.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's frustrating.
Which, speaking of rules, you're a big IBJJF guy.
Yes.
Not a lot of people are. A lot of people I've had on the podcast specifically are more ADCC, or honestly, a lot of them have been anti-IBJJF. I'm not going to lie. So you and Danny, I think, right? You're both. So what do you like about it? Like, what kind of gears you towards that?
I do think that the tactics part of it is very interesting. I think in a sub-only kind of match, you are kind of constraining the objective to only submitting the person, which is, I think, the true essence of jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
And I do, like, whenever I'm training, my goal is to always submit the person.
Yeah.
But I think to act in a way where there aren't other aspects of jiu-jitsu that can also be interesting is just kind of limiting your scope on what jiu-jitsu can possibly be.
Yeah.
So when you introduce the point system, and then even more specifically like IBJJF, you introduce advantages, it just makes the game so much more complex and, in my opinion, more interesting, because now it's not like, how can I win this? How can I achieve this macro goal of submitting the person? Well, maybe I can also explore these micro goals of positional dominance, or even smaller with the advantages. It's like a tactical dominance, which is, you can look at it and be like, well, that's really dumb. That's watering down jiu-jitsu. Or you can look at it and be like, wow, that opens up new avenues of how you can play the game. So that's kind of my perspective on it. I just think it makes it a lot more interesting because it gives you a lot more to look forward to when it comes to practicing your art.
Right.
And this is something like Mikey talks about a lot, which is like the 3 boxes. You can learn, you can be really good at jiu-jitsu intuitively and athletically. You can have really good technique, right? Or you can have really good tactics. Yeah. And, you could definitely win and be pretty good at jiu-jitsu by just filling in one of these boxes.
Yeah.
But our goal, if we want to be well-rounded grapplers, is to have all 3 boxes. So should you be doing strength and conditioning to be the best athlete you can possibly be? Yes. Should you be refining your technique, and that should be the main driving force behind all of your practices? Yes. You should be always trying to troubleshoot, fixing your mistakes, and making sure that your ratio of mistake to success is always in favor of success, right? And then the last box is tactics, right? Which I think IBJJF allows the athletes to explore a lot more deeply than, say, like ADCC or sub-only type of rule set, right? So with tactics, you can play the lines, right? So sometimes your decision is going to be based on how close to the out of bounds you are, Sometimes that means, all right, before I sweep this person, can I go for a submission? Well, this person has really good ankle lock defense, but that doesn't mean that if I go for an ankle lock and it's a threat, I'm not going to be awarded an advantage for going for the submission in the first place. So then that just changed. I think that's so beautiful how like advantage points can change the dynamic of the decision-making process.
Yeah.
And so if you're really like nerdy like me and Danny, it just adds layers to the game.
Yeah, it's like chess versus checkers.
Exactly.
And honestly, like as you're describing, I'm like, wow, I like literally never thought of it that way, because I think there's a very negative connotation with these advantages and disadvantages. But the way you're describing it, it's like every rule set in jiu-jitsu is a new game. Like there's jiu-jitsu, which is the umbrella, and then it's like every different rule set is a new type of game that you're signing up for.
Yeah.
Yes.
And like what you said with the negative connotation, and I think that comes from people not wanting to explore that one box. And that's fine. You could for sure put all your eggs into the other two boxes. But for us my goal is to understand jiu-jitsu as deeply as possible. And I understand that the rules could change how you express jiu-jitsu. So it's like, okay, these rule sets exist. Let's respect all of them and let's explore all of them deeply. But it's fine. Like if you're not interested in that type of exploration, that's completely fine. That's up to you. But for me, it's like, I'm only going to live once. I only have so much time. Why not just like have fun and explore all of these avenues is how I see it.
And it's interesting because as you're saying that, I'm thinking like we all know an athlete that like is just athletic or explosive and can beat everyone in the room at a certain level. But then when you climb the ladder and you get to that certain difference in like jiu-jitsu IQ, that's where like your athleticism no longer matters.
100%. And to add on to that, it's like when you understand jiu-jitsu through these three boxes, it makes training so much more interesting. So you bring up a good point. If I'm going to roll with someone who I know I can overwhelm athletically and technically, instead of just wasting around with someone below my skill just by murking them, why not explore now tactics? So I'll allow like certain exchanges to happen so I can practice my tactics. And that's why if you watch me and Danny train, rolls are going to look so different round to round because our goals are going to be changing person to person. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to roll with this person. My goal is to implement these type of tactics that I can expect if my opponent does this, right? And so I'll try to artificially create those scenarios so I can better my tactics in those areas.
Right.
And that's a good use of time when you're going against someone who maybe otherwise you could just literally Toriano past them a million times. Like for me, that's not fun.
Right.
Like being able to use skills that you know are like zero sum, that they're always going to work, that's not fun. Figuring out how you can best utilize a training partner to increase specific skills so that they're also having fun participating in that round, for me is the best way to go about it.
And also the way you're describing like working on different things and not using your strength or your size, or that's a lack of ego you have to get to that point. A lot of people don't have that.
And you have to be okay with like losing on a smaller scale.
That's what I'm saying,
right? Like you don't have to win every exchange. You can artificially allow perceptions of winning or losing to happen so you can work on certain skills. So if I'm trying to work on sweep prevention against someone, they're probably going to sweep me time to time because I'm not occupying decision making with like only winning and passing their guard.
You're working on something specific.
So there's this like artificial perception of like, oh, I'm getting swept, but I'm really like working on a skill in that process.
There's like give and take. And I feel like some people are not willing to give up anything because they're like so concerned of always like beating down on every single person in the room. It's like, well, I'm not going to give anyone the perception that they got something over me. So like, I'm just going to go ham. And it's like, okay, but you're only going to be good at like those four things you do.
And is that fun?
No, but I do think it
is fun if your goal, your sole purpose in jiu-jitsu is to feed your ego and to smash everyone.
You're right.
But if you have no ego and you're just trying to learn as much as possible, I would say it's not fun.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I think another hot take, and I don't know where you stand on this, is the whole ecological approach controversy. Because I know you've had Tom DeBlas on and you've had other people talk on it. Big Dan.
They were big ones.
And I don't want to like talk bad on them, but I just don't think people understand. Like I feel like there's two groups of people arguing different things, and I think there's a way to kind of consolidate and reconcile those misunderstandings. So ecological, and I think everyone would agree with this, that there's a difference between skill and a difference between like knowledge.
Yes.
Right. You can have knowledge of jiu-jitsu, and there's many ways you can acquire knowledge. And then there's like actual skill. And sometimes the semantics of it, like embodied knowledge, kind of misconstrues what we mean by knowledge. But what we're talking about is like your application of the information.
Yeah.
And so when you have someone like Tom the Blast or Big Dan arguing like Greg Souders on what approach is the best approach for learning, I feel like both sides are just arguing different things. Like you have Tom the Blast who's arguing, well, I think knowledge about jiu-jitsu is important. And then you have Greg Souders who's arguing, well, if we only have an hour of class time, that class time should be best used improving skill in jiu-jitsu, which is just, you know, someone's ability to embody the knowledge that they have of jiu-jitsu. And so I think if we can just kind of like, and again, I think students shouldn't really care about these terms, and students shouldn't really like so much be involved in these debates over like what training methodology should be used. But I do think coaches need to understand the difference so they can best understand how to implement different frameworks, right? So it's just like a very circular argument that a lot of these people are having. Yeah. So that's kind of my
I think I was thinking about this the other day because like obviously I had a very long conversation with Dan and then with Tom, and I watched Greg Souders. Not to be Switzerland, but I just feel like everyone should do whatever the hell works for you. Like, like it's kind of crazy to like, to me, it's like if you take jiu-jitsu out of it and it's like, oh, I think teaching math, like you should learn visually with like blocks for a child versus like writing it out. And I'm like, well, I guess it depends on how that individual person learns is kind of how I feel.
Yeah, 100%. I think and I think there's value to subjective enjoyment. So if a student prefers to be lectured on jiu-jitsu, then who are we to say like, I'm sorry, you're wasting your time, you're not acquiring skill? Like if that's what they want, that's what we should probably offer them. But going back to movement art, right? So I talked about how at movement art, the way I know that I've been able to cultivate the environment that I would have wanted is by, you know, observing the classroom after a class is over and seeing students taking learning into their own hands, coaching themselves. And I think that's ultimately what our goal should be. Because if you're Greg and you're only spending the hour helping students acquire skill via constraints, or if you're Tom the Blast and you're trying to mix all these frameworks together as much as you can in an hour, ultimately the students that are going to succeed the most at jiu-jitsu are the ones who are going to take learning into their own hands. So they have to be thinking about jiu-jitsu even outside of the classroom. That's
true.
These are the students that do the best. I have hobbyists who are watching instructionals on the weekends, who are going to open mats as often as they can. Ultimately, the students who care more about jiu-jitsu are going to be better at jiu-jitsu. So I think if you do that, then these arguments become a little bit less important because a lot of the learning is going to be done outside of the classroom. And then our role as coaches is to just kind of guide them as to where they should be kind of allocating their investment in. And that's what I think a coach should be. We should just be guiding them like, you know, this is what we should be doing with this hour. But you guys need to understand that if you want to be good at this thing, you have to invest a lot more than just this hour. And then it kind of solves the problem of like, how much can I cram into this hour? I think.
No, you're right. But also, it sounds like you do a little bit of both in your class, right? Like if you had to break it down.
But not so both in a sense where it's all going to be like direct perception for the most part. I don't believe that drilling statically has any effect on a student's ability to carry out those techniques. So I do think that drilling is a buzzword we use to categorize all these different movements, things that we do. But I try to refrain away from just drilling in the traditional sense, which
like
is
a
just
static
like a static drilling, a systematized drilling. I try to give the students as much context as possible, and they might be drilling, but really what they're doing is they're exploring those movements within a specific like task space, basically. So it's like, and so it's tough because there is a lot of like, well, these words could mean the same things.
Yeah.
But,
a lot of people I think are arguing completely different things, but they think they're arguing
and
the
that's
same
my
thing.
point. So
it's like overwhelming.
and it's like, well, you either have to understand what you're arguing or don't argue at all.
Yeah.
Because when Tom DeBlas says, well, I do both, well, technically you can't do both, right? Because like those two ideas are incompatible with each other. So what you want to say is like, I think that like offline information is useful, which is just like instruction. I think instructional constraints are useful. So you have to almost speak the language that the other
person's arguing. Yeah.
You can't just say like, well, I think drilling and positional sparring are compatible, because the other person is just
arguing that.
Is not. Yeah. Well, and they're just not even going to like take that into account, because that doesn't even fit into their framework.
Right.
Right. So to them, they just hear a contradiction. For you, you're trying to make sense of these things, but it's complicated.
It is complicated, and it's also just pointless because everyone's going to do what they want anyway.
Are your students getting better? Yes. Okay.
Yeah. Then let it be. But I see what you're saying. Like you're saying like the static drilling where it's like I go over how to do a triangle and then just do a triangle 65 times. Like, is that what you're talking when you say static drilling?
So basically when you tell someone this is how you do a triangle and you do positional sparring, you're basically creating a constraint. So I posted a Reddit thread. I was like, everyone's doing eco, whether they're aware of it or not. And it got so much backlash. People were like talking so much shit. And I just want people to understand, like, I'm not saying that to like undermine what you're doing. I'm saying that to make everyone realize that like this whole talk about eco is dumb, because it's not a matter of do constraints work or not. It's like, how much do you want to constrain? How much do you not want to constrain? And then people like Rick Souders are like, this amount of constraint is what's effective.
Yes.
And then Tom DeBlas is like, well, if I teach a technique and they do positional sparring, that's basically eco. It is. Greg is just saying that's not effective eco because the constraints are so restricting that you're not allowing your student to explore with different variations. So it's like,
and it's also the delivery of these arguments.
Yes.
The deliveries suck.
It could literally be a conversation of how can we meet in the middle and reconcile our perspectives of jiu-jitsu instead of like, no, I'm right. No, I'm right. It's like, that's so self-defeating.
And even if you are right, I'm not going to listen to you because you're screaming and talking over me.
Exactly. 100%.
Anything else you wanted to bring up, Sean? You look like you have something to say.
I was going to ask Nick for no particular reason.
So the question is, at the gym, you have a lot of high-level athletes. If I'm just a hobbyist that wants to come in and start, I might be intimidated by the level that you're producing in your gym. What would you say to me?
I think you have to reassure them that everyone who's stepped through those doors at some point were a novice, right? Just as they are. And so what they're really observing is like the end product of all those years of training and classes that, you know, they've also felt insecure in, but eventually overcame so that they can get to the level that they are at now. And that's why I think like you have to have, you know, a curriculum that's stratified in a way where it breaks it down into fundamentals classes and then like, you know, you could have your intermediate or advanced classes to avoid a lot of these anxieties about, well, will I ever reach that level? If you have a fundamentals class where you can kind of funnel newer students in, and then the goal of that fundamentals class is to make sure that they experience as much success as possible, then as they get introduced into the other classes, it's going to be a lot less anxiety driven for them. But again, like everyone is on their own journey, on their own trajectory. People are going to be world-class competitors. Some people are going to be really good, but they're just hobbyists. But what they need to understand is like everyone started in the same place, which is not understanding anything at all. And as a coach, when I am teaching the fundamentals, I try to always design practices so like anyone off the street can come in and do some level of jiu-jitsu with success, even on their first day. If you're teaching and you're ending class with people feeling frustrated and defeated, you're doing a terrible job. That doesn't mean like you're a terrible coach. You just have to really like see that and use that as feedback to influence future practices. So I'm like, okay, everyone is kind of looking at me with like a question mark above their head as I'm saying, do you have any questions? So maybe there was too much information, or maybe the goal was just a little too big. Let's break it down into smaller bite-sized pieces. So don't feel like don't be afraid of having your fundamental classes be so simple that it's almost impossible to not be successful in. And I just think this is something all coaches should take into consideration, because I think as coaches, we do sometimes fall into this trap of like, I want people to see how much I know.
Right.
I want students to be wowed by their coach's ability to teach. In reality, it's about how they feel from the beginning of the class and then comparing that with how they feel at the end of the class.
Correct.
If at the beginning of the class they're like, okay, this is a cool concept, I have no idea what we're doing, but I'm willing to learn. And then at the end of the class, they're like, oh yeah, like that was easy. Like I'm ready for the next class. Like what are we doing next, coach? That's what you want to. That's a good sign.
Yeah.
That's what you want to achieve. So if we can do more of that, I think it'll lessen the anxieties of like, oh my God, like Gabby's a world-class like competitor. Like how do I get there? Like how am I going to roll with her and give her a good round? So yeah, I think it just starts from, you know, the very beginning and scaling it up from there.
Yeah. And not to mention, like, even if it's not your first day, you could have a purple belt that's coming from another school and it's just a hobbyist and has no interest in being a competitor.
It's so common for someone from another gym to come to our gym and be like, I'm a purple belt, but I've never learned collar sleeve. Like, should I like give you my belt? Like, what does that mean? I'm like, no, like all the information you have up to this point makes you who you are. And we're going to work with that. And maybe you're a white belt, and this is the analogy I use a lot. It's like belts aren't real. Belts are just an average of all your skills.
Yes.
You could be a black belt, but be a white belt at something, even within jiu-jitsu. So I try to tell them like, okay, you're a white belt at collar sleeve, but you might be a purple belt at, you know, deep half. I don't know what your game is. I don't know if you've learned up to this point. So try not to take that to heart and just approach every new position, every new lesson with that same mindset you had as a white belt, which is like, wow, this is new and scary, but this is exciting. And I love the sensation of learning. So let's do this. Yeah. Regardless of where you are in the belt spectrum.
Right.
So.
It's interesting you bring that up because I just had a similar conversation with my friend and we were talking about how, isn't it funny how you can roll with somebody who knows something you don't know? Like I rolled with a girl recently and she was doing some crazy inversion that I would never know. And in my mind, I'm thinking like, God, like she's so impressive. Like she must be like a purple belt. And then she like asked for advice on how to lock up a triangle. Yeah. And I'm like, you know how to invert and knee bar me, but you don't know how to lock up. Like crazy, right? But it's like her journey's obviously different than mine. 100%. And what she spent time on is very different than what I spent time on. So it's very true what you're saying.
Yeah. And of course, that's so fascinating. Yeah. I don't know what their gym's curriculum is. Obviously, they place more of an emphasis on the inversion than the triangle. I know at Movement Art, we don't put, so I think historically what people would consider fundamentals, we've kind of deconstructed and said these are not fundamentals. Like we don't teach half guard to white belts. Usually we don't teach escapes that much. It's a very small part of the curriculum. What we focus a lot on is guard retention because we want students to be playing the game for as long as possible. And the only way to do that is to not have them get their guards passed that frequently. So we spend a lot of time doing guard retention and then escapes as an accessory to that, which a lot of schools will look at and be like, your white belts don't know any escapes? I'm like, maybe not, but I tell you what, it's going to take a lot longer to pass their guard, which means they're going to have a lot more time spending playing guard, going to close guard, doing submissions. And
have you found a lot of success with that now that it's been a little bit?
100%, because if you have more time working on the skills that get you towards winning the round, you're getting a lot more reps in that way. Whereas like if you structure your curriculum around escapes, well, you're already setting your students up to accept that passing is a natural part or consequence of doing jiu-jitsu. And so, okay, they're able to escape, but then now they're back to square one where they don't know how to prevent the pass, and now they're back to escaping. So it's like this ongoing feedback loop.
That's a good point.
Whereas we're like, okay, if you get to side control, you might not know how to escape now, but it's going to take longer to get to the side control, and you're going to be able to play the game for a lot longer.
That's a good point. Is that something you guys like implemented from day one or over time?
From day one.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Because me and Danny went into it with the realization that at the highest level at black belt, guard passes are pretty seldom. They're pretty rare unless there's like a crazy skill disparity. So why is that? Well, that's because people at black belt usually get to a point of having good enough guard retention where they can spend a lot more time attacking. Why not just do that from the beginning? So
skip it all.
So we kind of shifted the paradigm to like guard retention should be a fundamental skill, and then escapes could be a more advanced skill. because assuming that the person's good enough to pass your guard, that means they're better than you.
Yeah.
So then now you should be trying to escape getting back to playing the game.
That's like the next level.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
I like that.
if your guard is not good as a white belt and you're getting passed right away, you might be able to escape if that's what you're focusing on, but you're still not doing jiu-jitsu enough to get better at jiu-jitsu.
Right. It's like, let's avoid that altogether.
Yes, exactly.
I like that. It's like when people are like, how do I get out of a triangle? And it's like, don't get into one.
Yeah, exactly.
It's kind of that concept.
It's kind of that, yeah.
That's cool. Anything else you wanted to mention? Or any shout outs?
Yeah.
It's your moment.
So if you're in the area, you know, you're a fellow Pennsylvanian or you're in the tri-state area, feel free to stop by. We have free open mats on Saturdays, open to the public, no mat fee. That's at 11 a.m. And we basically train till the wheels fall off. So if you come in, come with the expectation that you're going to be training for hours on end. Me and Danny are pretty open. You can ask us questions about anything. That's how we like to operate at Movement Art. It's like everyone's an open book. Everyone is more than willing to help each other out. Like we talked about, it's very collaborative. So come in with the mindset that you're going to learn a lot, you're going to train a lot, and you can find us at Movement Art Jiu Jitsu on Instagram, at that Nick Salles. My sponsors are Humanade and Choju. If you're, getting muscle cramps in your training, it's probably because you're not hydrating properly. So make sure to go over to Choju, get some Restore, which is their hydration formula, and make sure you prevent yourself from cramping in training.
Hell yeah. Thanks, Nick. This was fun.
Thank you.